The World Cup has produced more than its fair share of shocking moments in its 20 editions. As it all kicks off in Russia, we've narrowed it down to 21, featuring assault, robbery and collusion, and that's just on the pitch. 21. Portugal vs Holland, 2006. The Battle of Santiago between Chile and Italy in 1962 would almost certainly have been abandoned as a violent farce if it was played today, so comparing it to modern games is a bit of a futile exercise. But the 2006 last 16 clash between Portugal and Holland featured a similar amount of spice. Mark van Bommel kicked things off with a second-minute booking, the first of 16 yellows dished out during the game between two sides battling to face England in the quarters. 4 players, Costinha, Deco, Giovanni van Bronckhorst and Khalid Boulahrouz, were sent off, and it was a miracle that others didn't join them, with Luis Figo somehow getting away with headbutting Van Bommel. 20. Roy Keane leaves the Ireland squad, 2002. Talk to the right people in Ireland, and you'll still find a healthy debate about who is in the wrong in Saipan, Roy Keane or Mick McCarthy. The Manchester United midfielder, ever the perfectionist, was unhappy with the unprofessional nature of Ireland's preparation, including, but not limited to, a rock-hard training pitch and their kid-going AWOL. Manager McCarthy then suggested in a team meeting that Keane had faked an injury to get out of an international fixture, and, well, that didn't go down too smoothly. I don't rate you as a manager and I don't rate you as a person. You can stick it up your books, the captain snapped before walking out. 19. The Stolen World Cup, 1966. On reflection, releasing the Jules Rimet Trophy for display in a Westminster stamp exhibition in March 1966, just before the World Cup, perhaps wasn't the brightest move. While the exhibition was open, the cup was watched by 2 guards at all times. After closing time, not so much. One Sunday the trophy disappeared, the lax security provisions mysteriously breached, and for 1 week a farcical search continued. That's until David Corbett, South London resident, took his dog Pickles out for a walk. Pickles sniffed treasure underneath a bush. Treasure which turned out to be the missing trophy. 18. Senegal vs France, 2002. Should the hubris of the French team in 2002, defending world and European champions, have made this inevitable? Perhaps, but it was still an enormous shock when Les Blues, shorn of the injured Zinedine Zidane, were beaten by a Senegal team comprised entirely of hitherto mid-level players from the French league. El Hadji Diouf made a mockery of the 34-year-old Frank Leboeuf, but it was midfielder Papa Bouba Diop who scrambled home the only goal. This was just the beginning of France's humiliation, though, as they exited the tournament in the first round without scoring. 17. France vs Kuwait, 1982. France were 3-1 up in this group game, coasting towards a victory when Alain Garris found himself through on goal without an opponent in sight. The Kuwait defenders had heard a whistle and, adhering to the first rule of Sunday league football, played to it. Alas, the shrill sound came from somewhere in the stands, and the players were understandably miffed when Garris scored unopposed. Not half as miffed as Sheikh Fahad Ahmad Al-Sabah, president of the Kuwait Football Association. He marched onto the pitch and told his players to leave unless the goal was chalked off. Remarkably, Russian referee Miroslav Stupar agreed and Garris's perfectly fine effort was disallowed. 16. Geoff Hurst's goal is awarded, 1966. It wasn't over the line. Obviously, it wasn't over the line. The score was 2-2 in extra time of the 1966 World Cup final against West Germany when Geoff Hurst spun and hammered a shot against the bar. It bounced down on the line. England protested. Referee Godfrey Dienst referred to linesman Tofik Baramov, who nodded with certainty. Goal. Baramov later wrote that he thought the ball had actually hit the net, rather than the crossbar, which explained his decision, although the story that on his deathbed he said simply Stalingrad when asked about the goal is almost certainly nonsense. 15. Luis Suarez bites Giorgio Chiellini, 2014. Before the 2014 World Cup, Suarez had gone on something of a PR campaign. "I want to change the bad boy image," he told Sports Illustrated. "I don't think I am at all how I've been portrayed." And to prove his words weren't idle, a few weeks later he bit an opponent on the football pitch for the third time. With 11 minutes of Uruguay's group game against Italy remaining, Suarez and Giorgio Chiellini tussled, and both players fell to the floor. Initially, few people were sure of what had happened, until Chiellini pulled aside his shirt to reveal bite marks. The striker was banned for 9 international matches, all football for 4 months, and fined 100,000 Swiss francs. 14. Italy vs North Korea, 1966. North Korea's relationship with the rest of the world wasn't always as rosy, problem-free, uncomplicated and stable as it currently is. In 1966, the country lacked diplomatic relations with many nations, but everyone adores an underdog story. So, after the North Koreans beat Italy at Arsenal Park in that year's World Cup, everyone loved them. Huge shock though it was, Italy weren't actually all that. Despite their team being chock full of stars, they hadn't progressed past the first round since winning the thing in 1938. After defeat by the USSR, Italy needed to beat Korea to progress, but a goal from Pat Duick just before halftime was enough to send them out. 13. Ronaldo nearly misses the World Cup final, 1998. The 1998 World Cup should have been Ronaldo's moment. A phenomenal young player coming towards his peak, dominating the world. But the final didn't go to plan. "I decided to get some rest after lunch and the last thing I remember was going to bed," he told 442. "After that, I had a convulsion. I was told I wasn't going to play, but all the essential medical exams didn't show anything was abnormal. I approached manager Mario Zagallo at the stadium and said, 'I'm fine. I'm not feeling anything. Here are the test results. They're fine. I want to play.' I didn't give him an alternative." Brazil lost 3-0 to hosts France and Ronaldo was a shadow of himself. But his time would come. 12. Brazil won 7 Germany, 2014. The tournament that was supposed to heal a 64-year-old national scar, see number 7 on this list, only ended up opening it even further. It was a bit like going to hospital to sort a chronic back problem only to slip and break your neck. By the 25th minute of this 2014 World Cup semi-final, Germany were 5-0 up against the hosts. Half of the dazed Brazil team looked like they wanted to get off the pitch as quickly as possible to end the torture. Half wanted to stay there forever to put off what would come next. "My message for the Brazilian people is to please excuse us for this performance," pleaded manager Luiz Felipe Scolari. 11. Zidane headbutts Materazzi, 2006. For a player with such delicate, dancing feet, Zidane made his most significant impact on World Cup finals with his head. In 1998, 2 headers won the tournament for France. But 8 years later, with the end of his glorious playing career in sight, it was a slightly more aggressive intervention from his gleaming noggin, with Marco Materazzi having equalized Zidane's Panenka penalty. The game was in extra time when Materazzi made a choice comment to his opponent. Zidane retaliated by planting a headbutt right in the Italian's chest, earning himself a red card and helping Italy go on to win the showpiece on spot kicks. 10. Mussolini's Blackshirts win, 1938. The potential for political propaganda in sport is almost as old as sport itself. Benito Mussolini had his feet well and truly under the table as Italy's dictator by the time that the 1938 World Cup in France rolled around. Italy, the defending champions, had a chance to win on foreign soil, and Mussolini saw the chance for a piping hot nationalistic display of superiority. Anti-fascist protests were rumbling in those pre-war days, but Mussolini was determined that Italy would win, and win with the Fascioli Torio, the fascist emblem, on their shirts. In terms of symbolism, an Italy team wearing black shirts and doing a fascist salute before game couldn't really be beaten, and nor could the team, who triumphed over Hungary in the final. 9. West Germany vs Austria, 1982. Subtlety is key when you're contriving a result. Don't make it look too obvious. That's not something that West Germany and Austria seemed too concerned about in 1982, when one particular scoreline turned out to be most convenient for both sides. A 1-0 win for the West Germans in the final Group 2 game in Gijón would see both sides qualify for the second phase, eliminating an Algeria team that had shocked Germany with a 2-1 win in the opening game. Horst Hrubesch scored in the 11th minute. And while the popular image of a game with two teams passing it sideways until they were allowed to stop isn't quite right, it was clear by the final quarter that both sides settled for the convenient result. 8. Cameroon vs Argentina, 1990. Even if Cameroon's preparations for the 1990 World Cup had been perfect, this would have been an extraordinary result. But they were a shambles in the lead-up to the tournament, losing to assorted club teams in preparatory friendlies, rife with arguments and with a manager who nearly got the sack. However, in the tournament's Milan opener, Cameroon somehow defeated the reigning champions. François Omambique's weak header squirted through Nari Pompito's hands, which then allowed Cameroon to go about the real business of the day, booting Argentine players as high in the air as possible. 7. Brazil vs Uruguay, 1950. The story goes that Moqueir Barbosa, Brazil's goalkeeper at the 1950 World Cup, held a barbecue at some point in the 1960s. A guest asked what the large pieces of wood that were burning to cook the meat were. They were, Barbosa said, the posts from the final match of that World Cup, which some misguided soul had given to him for reasons unclear. On the morning of the decisive game against Uruguay, a Rio newspaper printed a photo of the team saying, "These are the world champions." But despite Frioca giving Brazil the lead, their neighbors came back through Juan Alberto Schiaffino, and then in the closing stages, an Alcides Giglia shot crept under Barbosa. Cue national hysteria, mourning and humiliation. 6. Schumacher vs Battiston, 1982. Harald Schumacher's book Blowing the Whistle, published in 1987, is an illuminating read for a number of reasons, not least his assertion that in his collision with Patrick Battiston in the semi-final of the 1982 World Cup, he did the Frenchman a favor. "If I'd collided with him head-on, it would have been worse for him," Schumacher wrote. He also said that his post-game quip where, after being told the news that Battiston had lost 2 teeth, he said, "If that's all that's wrong with him, I'll pay to have them crowned," was a stupid remark born of relief that the injury wasn't more serious. Maddox had to administer oxygen to the unconscious Battiston. The referee awarded Schumacher a goal kick. 5. USA vs England, 1950. The story, almost certainly apocryphal, has been told many times. This result was such a shock that some newspapers assumed the Wire report of a 1-0 final score was a typo, and instead told that England had won 10-0. True or not, this was the biggest World Cup upset up to that point. An English team featuring Stan Mortensen, Tom Finney, Billy Wright and Roy Bentley, beaten by a ragtag American bunch, most of whom weren't professionals and some of whom weren't American. The goal scorer Joe Gittins, born in Haiti and who moved to New York to study at Columbia University 3 years earlier, washed dishes in a restaurant. 4. The Miracle of Bern, 1954. It's worth remembering that, 2 weeks before the 1954 World Cup final, the brilliant Hungary team of Ferenc Puskás, Sandor Kocsis, Nander Hidegkuti beat West Germany 8-3. A hammering, and not an unexpected one, and when both teams reached the final, a repeat was expected. And yet, Puskás was famously half-fit, at best, after a reducer from Werner Liebrich in that first game fractured his ankle. A village fair outside their hotel had disrupted Hungary's sleep the night before the final. The rain was torrential, and the Germans wore revolutionary screw-in studs on their boots, helping them on the sodden turf. Hungary went 2-0 up inside 8 minutes, only to throw it all away and lose 3-2. 3. The Battle of Santiago, 1962. The game you are about to see, began David Coleman, introducing the highlights of Chile's group game against Italy, is the most stupid, appalling, disgusting and disgraceful exhibition of football in the history of the game. This is the first time these countries have met. We hope it will be the last. The first sending off came after 12 minutes. Giorgio Farini initially refused to leave the pitch, and it went downhill from there. Lionel Sanchez broke Italy captain Humberto Maccio's nose, then landed one on Mario David, who was dismissed for retaliating. In the end, the miracle was that only 2 men were sent off by referee Ken Aston, who later came up with the idea of yellow and red cards. 2. The death of Andres Escobar, 1994. The intertwining of Colombia's national football team with organized crime was always likely to end in tragedy. Heavily fancied before the 1994 World Cup, they were eliminated in the first round, partly because of a defeat by the USA in which Andres Escobar scored a hideously unlucky own goal. Upon the team's return, Escobar was in the Medellin nightclub when some man tried to provoke him. Rather than react, he chose to go home. As he sat in his car, 3 men approached and 2 of them shot him 6 times. Humberto Castro Munoz, linked to a drug cartel, confessed to Escobar's murder, which was widely believed to be punishment for his own goal. 1. The Hand of God, 1986. If you were wondering, in the 32 years since the 1986 World Cup quarter-final, whether Diego Maradona has any regrets about his first goal against England, well, unsurprisingly not. For me, it was like stealing from a thief. Not a crime at all, he wrote in Touched by God, his book about the tournament. And in many ways, it would be a shame if Maradona did regret it, ruining the image of the swirling genius who didn't give a flying one about anybody, especially not the English. His handball put Argentina 1-0 up, before a goal breathtaking for all of the right reasons made it 2-0 just minutes later.